Hello and welcome to Seeing Red. It is Monday, April 29th, 2024. I am Will Leitch here, as always, with the great Bernie Miklasz. The Cardinals were this close on Sunday, Bernie, to not only sweeping the series against the Mets and getting to 500, but in fact, getting out of last place. That was that close. They would be out of last place right now. Emotionally, I think I just feel better if they were out of last place. But nevertheless, Bernie, the Cardinals are still 2 games under. They're still in last place. There's still questions. But after a brutal weekend against the Brewers, it's not like everything's fixed any stretch of the imagination. But I'll take 4-2.
Yeah, that's how I feel. That was a tough one to lose yesterday. However, it was an enthralling game. It was just wonderful to watch. And what are you going to do? I mean, we've asked so much out of this pitching staff, and by and large, they've come through, especially the bullpen. So I couldn't get too crabby about that. But yeah, it would have put more of a shine on the week. 5-1 instead of 4-2 would have got them to 500. So that's one that got away, and they're still having that problem closing out series by winning the third game of the series, or the final game of the series. You know, if they had just kind of they're 1-8 in the final games of a series, and if they had just gotten 3 or 4 wins, they'd be over 500 right now. And a lot of those games were close games, so it was very doable. So, in that context, it's a little disappointing because they've left some wins on the table. But I like the way they're trending. I mean, the offense is still a real concern, but there's a lot of other things. Pretty much every other area has fallen into place solidly, or even better than solidly. And, it could be worse, which is not much of a battle cry. But I saw something that you wrote when you were putting the MLB power rankings together. This just feels different than the 2023 Cardinals. No one's saying this team's great. They got a lot to prove, but it does feel different. So I agree with what you said there.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that's necessarily sunk in nationally yet. I think you can
No.
see. I always remind everyone that I write the power rankings, but they are not, in fact, my personal power rankings. So
Right, exactly.
I have the Cardinals higher in those rankings than I think they're 23
Yeah.
in the voting rankings. I'm not sure everyone's quite caught up to that yet. And whatever, the Cardinals are in last place. They're 2 games under 500. I certainly don't expect people to be like, no, really, they're great. Like they're getting outscored. They're hardly getting. The things that we're worried about these teams, they haven't fixed just yet. But I'm starting to notice, I wonder if it's because they played the Mets. You're starting to get guys that we have really been kind of like pointing out, like there's something special going on here. Starting to get some national notice. I think that starts with Mason Winn. Ken Rosenthal wrote in his notes column today for The Athletic, basically pointing out not just how Mason Winn has basically been the best player on the Cardinals. Maybe you can say Wilson Contreras or Sonny Gray, but certainly Mason Winn is the guy that I think is making Brandon Crawford increasingly close to being a waiver bait. But Rosenthal had a really good interview with Aronado about Winn, and I thought it was really interesting because basically I'm going to just go ahead and quote from it here.
Sure.
Let me find it. I had it for a second. Oh, I always take it away right when I'm about to go. Here is the quote where he talks to Aronado, and this is what Aronado says about Mason Winn to Ken Rosenthal. To be honest, playing with him makes me want to step up my fielding. He goes hard after everything. Not that I don't, but after last year, the way I fielded, I see him getting after it. And I'm like, yeah, man, I need to get back to that. He brings energy. Watch him. He's constantly talking to the pitcher. Let's go. You got this guy. Nasty pitch. I'm like, man, I used to do that when I was a young player with the Rockies. I kind of slowly got away from it. Now I'm like super quiet. He's constant energy. You feed off it. Some teams might think he's talking trash, but he's really just talking to the pitcher all the time. It's pretty cool. Okay, a couple things on that. First off, a great little note from Rosenthal, by the way. It's always great when he's just sideline. It's one nice thing about one of the many nice things about getting a Fox game on Saturday. You see, like Rosenthal has like a note about one of your players that kind of pops up there. That's a great note about Arenado because it tells you a lot about Winn and Aronado. It actually tells you a little about both of them because we've clearly seen that, right? Like you remember Aronado, I think, has been a fine player for the Cardinals, if not necessarily a great one. But I feel like the fundamental difference that you have seen in Aronado in a Cardinals uniform that we used to see in a Rockies uniform is that electricity, is that activity of that constant hype. Sometimes it can be hyperactivity, but Aronado was this truly thrilling player. Remember when Aronado went to the Cardinals, I remember joking on social media back when I used social media that wow, how are people going to claim the Cardinals have no likable players now because everybody loves Nolan Arenado? Well, it's kind of funny because Arenado's gotten a little bit farther away from that player that people kind of fell in love with Colorado. To see him see that player that he once was. It's not that Arenado's a bad player now. We can talk about his hitting and so on, but clearly he's not the same person or the same guy or the same player that he was in Colorado. For him to see and recognize that in Winn is a reminder, A, Arenado, it'd be nice to see that step up. But B, also the thing that really has been missing for all this talk of the Cardinals need these veterans, these veteran guys to come in there, and maybe they do. What they really
Sure.
need is a young dude with energy coming in there and getting them excited. And Winn has been that guy at the plate, at the field. And like there were plays he made this weekend. The one that ended the game on Saturday, I can't believe he was out on that play. That's all Winn doing it. It's like Mason Winn right now looks like a dude that I want to watch play shortstop every day for the next 10 years for the Cardinals. And it feels like just having him out there, even with all the offensive problems, though he's hitting well, actually changes just the whole vibe of what's going on in the field.
No, he's really been a pleasure, and he's so smart. I mean, he's advanced beyond his years. Sorry for the cliche, but he really is. He's very, very mature, and he's just a heads up guy. And the relentless nature of how he competes is got to be something that impacts the rest of the team. Arenado, uh, foremost, because I like what he had to say there about him. But um, the Cardinals have had a problem sort of getting their prospects to the finish line, so to speak, where you see, a guy do well and then for some reason, he regresses and he does well. And then he goes into the tank. And, I don't have to go through all the names. We know who all the names are. They've had a real problem in this area. I look at Win and I don't and I'm trying to say, well, don't get carried away, Bernie, but when I look at Win, he just doesn't seem like these other guys. He just seems different. And that I even saw some of that late last season, even though he hit 172. I mean, I've talked about this a lot. I mean, he didn't draw a walk like his first month, but in his second month, he's like, well, I'm chasing pitches. I just got to take walks. If they're not gonna pitch, throw strikes. I'll take walks. And he took a bunch of walks. And it's not one of those things that jumps out at you, but you're like, whoa, that's a pretty good example of how quickly a guy adjusts. And this isn't his first time in the big league. So he's a pro. I mean, and he's a really talented player to say the least. He's the best base stealer they have, arguably the best base runner they have. His defense speaks for itself. That arm is pretty amazing. And yeah, you need guys that other players look at and feel energized just by his energy. So, yeah, we're all big Mason Wynn fans here. I don't think there's any doubt about it.
And I think there's still more left in the bat. He hit for a little bit more power than this in Memphis. He had 18
Sure.
homers in 105 games last year, which is, again, not like light tower power, but is more than, say, the zero that he currently has. I think there is power there. And I think you're right. That's been a very clear change that we've seen in him. There is the thing about Wynn that I think is exciting, the defense is the same. Like the defense is just electric, and we saw that even when he was playing in the Futures game. But you see him making adjustments, and more to the point, you see him making adjustments that don't seem to like send him spinning off in weird directions. Like you can see him making the adjustment to get better and not have him be constantly in between or constantly behind, or a guy that's just having issues all around. Which I think brings us to the other kind of big news from the week, which was Jordan Walker was sent down. And he was sent down. It is worth noting. I'm going to go ahead and look up Jordan Walker's minor league stats right here. Since he's gone down there, it's not like he's launching the ball down there or anything. I know he's working on things. He's currently he's 1 for 4. We played one game at 1 for 4 on Sunday. But what are you worried about Walker? This is the second time in a row, him being sent down, kind of being sent down for the same things, though I will say he looks a little bit more lost this season than he looked last year. Last year, the idea was like he was hitting the ball hard, but he's pounding it on the ground. He is still doing that, by the way. Like I think he's still at a 50% clip ground ball rate. But the Walker thing that actually seemed to be more concerning is he kind of was in that Gorman stretch where he was down 0-2 every single time he came to the plate. He always seemed late on fastballs and was spilling that ball low and outside. Are you worried about Walker? Obviously, the raw skills are there, so you're going to be able to see it. But are you worried about Walker at all?
Um, Mildly, because there's two reasons. One is statistical. I think RJ Anderson, our friend at CBSSports.com, great analyst. I think he pointed this out. I did a little more digging into it after that. Jordan Walker killed fastballs last year. This year he's almost defenseless against fastballs. I don't know how you lose the ability to hit a fastball. It tells me his mechanics are real screwed up. And if you remember, Eduardo Perez pointed that out on the national game. Said I don't understand the way he's like setting up at the plate. Pointed out some stuff. I thought it was really enlightening. Here's the other thing, and I've been saying this on my radio show, so I should say this here, and people might take it the wrong way, or they might think that I'm like questioning his character or something like that, and I'm doing nothing of the sort. But when we talk about Winn, the one thing that jumps out at to both of us and all Cardinals fans is his maturity level. I don't think that Walker has Winn's maturity level. Now, some people say, well, what do you mean by that? Oh, come on. Well, first of all, you recall when they sent him down last year and, they were hoping that he would, start to elevate pitches, put them in the air. He seemed really resistant to the idea. In fact, he openly said like, well, no, I just went back to what I was doing, and basically saying he ignored their advice. He dismissed it, or he just didn't really pay much heed to it.
And he didn't do it in like a confrontational way. But he was kind of matter of fact about it. Yeah.
So he kind of like knew better than the people who were trying to help him out. And look, maybe he had a good reason for doing that, but I'll never forget that because it raised a little teeny red flag for me. And so I wonder how receptive he is. Is he as receptive as he should be to when batting coaches or even teammates tell him what they see and politely and positively to help him offer some advice? I mean, is he one of these young guys that sort of, I hate to say this, but does he have to fail to get that kind of attitude or sort of a philosophical adjustment that it's like, okay, what I've been doing, what I think I ought to be doing isn't working. So let's start this thing over. That's what I hope will come from this. And Mason Winn himself, he said, no, he basically told media, he said, no, Jordan doesn't have any problem going down at all. He thinks this will really help him. He's got a great attitude about it. And I think that that's going to be a big part. I really do. And again, I can't stand the way things are portrayed. When I talk about, I don't think he's as mature as Winn. I'm not smearing him. I'm not saying he's a bad guy. None of that nonsense. I'm just saying young players all grow up at a different pace, some faster than others. And maybe Walker needed to just sort of have the shock of being so bad this year, which he never was this bad last year, that maybe it'll just get him to refocus and maybe open his mind to some ideas that people who really are behind him would like to see him try.
Yeah, I have to say, he looks worse this year. Like he does. Like
He does,
looks
absolutely.
worse than he did last year. And he doesn't look helpless. I mean, he looks helpless like he's lost right now, but it's not like the talent is gone. It's not like his ability to hit the ball hard is gone. You talk about a guy that may have to fail early on. Well, I mean, this is now 2 straight years. And I say that out of, we talked about this a couple weeks ago of like the main 3 guys that were struggling were Goldschmidt, Aronado, and Walker. And those are the 3 guys that most likely to be got on the lineup. I will give the Cardinals credit for this because I think you were skeptical that they would sit Walker. I thought maybe they should, and I was a little more hope. I thought they was a more of a chance, but I still didn't think they'd do it. So the fact that they've sent him down, I think speaks not only to them understanding, like to do it 2 years in a row is a thing. Cause he solved a lot of stuff at the end of last year.
Yeah.
Like he looked terrific at the end of last year. So and listen, whatever, baseball's,
But when they sent him down last year, it was like basically the end of April. His numbers were starting to fade, right? He cooled down, but at the time they sent him down, he was hitting 274, so it's not,
right.
that's not 155. I mean, I don't think I think they saw him going in a bad direction as far as too many ground balls, and they wanted to make him a swing adjustment, and which I think is a reasonable thing to do. Although you can make the case they didn't have to send him down, but I think their hearts were in the right place for the most part. But this year, he's just flat out overmatched. I mean, he never looked overmatched, like terribly overmatched. All hitters look like that over a week or something. Everybody goes through it. I never thought he was ever terribly overmatched the way we've seen this year. Not, I didn't see that last year at all. He had to make corrections, and things did get better on that end with the more fly balls and all that. And he did peak the last month and a half or so of the season. He was great. But he never came close to putting anything together early this season, and he looked like a guy who was lost at the plate. I never thought he was lost at the plate last year.
I mean, maybe I mean, honestly, maybe he just needs to go crush some dudes. Like, maybe that's what he needs. Like, he's obviously a talented guy. Like, Walker looks like you see Walker on the field now in the major leagues, and he looks bigger and stronger than most of the people there. So imagine what he's going to look like in Memphis, a place that he didn't play very much until last year. He didn't play at all until the beginning of last year. I think you're seeing that with Scott, right? Scott is now he's finally playing in AAA. And I think I heard Derek Gould had his colleague Guerrero on his podcast this week, and they talked about how basically the Cardinals' future outfield is now the two-thirds of the outfield in Memphis and how that grows moving forward. And this is the advantage that the Cardinals have because there are times out there where we'd have been like, well, if Walker isn't in the lineup, what are they going to do? And now, like Nootbaar is back healthy. He's not all the way back. He doesn't look still. I keep waiting for the Nootbaar explosion. I feel like it's been a couple of years now that I'm waiting for the Nootbaar explosion, but certainly I think he's a guy you can have there. Donovan is coming back around and plays a better left field than I think I give him credit for because he doesn't always look very smooth out there, but Donovan generally makes the play out there, and I don't think gets lost out there. So, and I think Siani's probably got another week and a half until Carlson comes back. Hopefully, you never know with Carlson, but certainly there's options there. The point is, you now, as much as I want Walker on this team, as much as I know he's a big part of the Cardinals' future and frankly, a part of the present, Scott to me is different. Scott is go play a full year. Like if Carlson gets back and Edman gets back after that, Scott can play a full year in Memphis and it's fine. Walker is someone that I want on back on this team, but you don't have to rush him. You don't have to rush him, I guess, until Nootbaar gets hurt or if Carlson gets hurt again, which could always happen. But this is the advantage of having all of those guys, of not trading a Carlson, of not trading a Nootbaar for one of these guys, or not trading a Donovan. When some guys were talking about this, you actually have a lot of options now, and you can let Walker figure it out. You don't have to rush him now. There's no Rookie of the Year award. That's why he was up at the beginning of last year, because they wanted to get the Rookie of the Year. They thought he might have a chance at the Rookie of the Year award so they could get the draft pick that the Orioles got last year. So I think there's value in, I understand what they were trying to do, but you don't have to rush Walker right now. Just like you definitely don't have to rush Scott. I'd like to see Walker honestly get like a full month in the minors right now.
Yeah, I agree.
And I said I miss Walker. I love watching him play. He's one of the reasons I'm most excited about the Cardinals over the last next half decade or so. But I think it's time to let him just kind of sit
Right.
down there and rake for a while.
And can I backtrack to something I said? Because
Oh, please, please.
I can make a better point, and I'll be brief. All right. We all know that at some point last season, pretty early on, I mean, not the first month, but I mean, I think maybe when he came back, I mean, Willie McGee just took Walker under his wing and just said, "Well, look, we're gonna work every day. We're gonna go out there before the game, 3 hours before the game. We're gonna work on outfield drills, and I'm gonna show you what I know." And then Walker was so encouraged by that. Then during the offseason, he spent a lot of time with Jose Kendo working on fundamentals in the outfield and everything else. And he's clearly a better outfielder now. But it's interesting that, he was embarrassingly poor, and he knows that. Embarrassingly poor as a right fielder last year. The team has a lot to do with that because they never gave him time to develop as an outfielder in the minors. But so he was embarrassed by how poorly he played. He never wanted it to happen again, and he worked so hard at it, and he worked with coaches, and he wanted everything that they would tell him, and he put it to use and he became better. I think now we're seeing the hitting side of that. Maybe he's been somewhat reluctant to change what he's doing. Hey, I know what I'm doing. I've always hit, so on and so forth. it took an embarrassment in right field with his defense to get him to like really embrace the coaching. I'm hoping that that's the case with his offense, that he'll realize, there's a lot of things I can be doing better, and I'm going to take any good ideas anybody wants to give me because I don't want to hit like this anymore. So that's what I'm hoping. And you know what? I think he's a smart guy, so I like his chances of doing that by embracing coaching or advice and putting it to work. Because who the heck wants to hit 155? Not this dude, that's for sure.
And eventually they are going to need him. I mean, this is the
Sure,
thing.
oh, yeah,
They
yeah.
built that, and it's worth noting. So we got a couple questions about this. I think are relevant to this. And Norman sends us a note. Said he was listening to Loud Outs on MLB Radio. I don't know that show. I don't listen to the MLB Sirius radio station, but I listen to podcasts like this one. Look at this great podcast we do here.
Sure.
Listening to listen. You say listen to Loud Outs on MLB Radio, and they were very critical of the Cardinals minor league system as it relates to the development of hitters. I've heard you guys you and Bernie talk being critical of the Cardinals' development of pitching, which I definitely agree with, says Norman. So I was curious your thoughts on their ability to develop hitters, and if this is a problem as well. Do we have a total breakdown of our player development system under our current front office? Daniel also basically notes that also asks, how is it that Vince Coleman is the last Cardinal outfielders drafted by the Cardinals to make multiple All-Star games with the bird on the bat? Now, I don't think that John Mozeliak has to answer for Dal Maxville or anything on this. So I don't think it's blaming him that far. But do you think, Bernie, now that we've seen, to me, Scott was not ready, and that was a desperation thing. But we have seen some of these outfielders that we were very, very excited about not develop the way that I think. Do you think it's a messaging thing? Do you think that they get the Cardinals get us too high on these guys, or do you think there's something breaking down the process, or is it just random stuff that happens?
It's listen. The one thing I'm convinced on this is that there's no easy one size fits all answer. It's pretty complicated because sometimes we sort of give the players a break that I don't think they should get. Dylan Carlson, when he came up in 2020, looked great. In 2021, he got off to a kind of an average start. In the second half of the 2021 season, the dude got on base all the time and he slugged over 500 and he was outstanding. O'Neill put together that excellent 2021 season, the one that we had been waiting for. And then what happens after that? He's injured all the time. His agent takes him to war, that arbitration before the 2022 season or the 2022 season. And it kind of messed O'Neill's head up. I mean, I just want to be, I'm going to like sort of have a little discipline in terms of blaming them about everything that's going wrong with these outfielders. Because even with Randy Rosarina, for example, he was developing great. I mean, he just started putting up monster numbers at AAA, and John Mozeliak wanted him up here, and then Mike Schilt wouldn't play him in September, so they never knew what they had, and that was their mistake. And Bill DeWitt Jr., I talked to him about it, and he agreed. He said, we didn't see enough of him. We liked him, but we didn't see enough of him, and that's on us. Is that a developmental thing, or is that just making a boneheaded decision? You really like this guy, you develop him, he's doing what you thought he would do in the minors, and then you bring him up at a time where you need outfielders, and the manager, for whatever reason, doesn't like him and doesn't play him. So there's a lot of ways to go with this. But it's not like point at one thing and say that's it. There's a lot of different factors, and I think the players have some to do with it themselves. Adolis Garcia is a whole different situation, but again, the fact is they parted company with him without ever really giving him a major league opportunity, so we can fault that. But I don't know. I mean, Bader, they pretty much got the best out of Bader. That if since we've seen him since he left St. Louis, he had that incredible postseason for the Yankees. But come on, that's an outlier type of thing. I don't know. I'm just not going to jump to that conclusion. And again, if I'm right about Walker, and I think I am, if he's been somewhat resistant to coaching, because he thinks he can figure it out on his own. Okay, well, whose fault is that? Is that you? Do we point the finger at the Cardinals for not developing him? He looked pretty damn developed last year, and his defense came a long way. So I'm not. I just don't. I don't do the one size fits all thing. I think it's too complicated to be so simplistic. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I'll even go you one further. I listen. It is always a fun thing. It was pointed out to me. We joked last week that even Richie Palacios is having a good year for the Rays. But, okay, let's just, like, every time national people talk to me about the Cardinals, they're always saying, "Wow, traded another out. Look at Tyler O'Neill.
Yeah,
Look at this guy."
have they watched Andrew Kittredge pitch at all? I wonder.
Yeah, and well,
See,
I think the kid
I get tired of this always leaning in on narratives, right? Because
because I'm not sure any of those I think the Arozarena one is the worst one. I think the Rosarina, but I
yeah,
think it's a different circumstance for the reasons that you just discussed. Like, it was kinda clear that a Rosarina I mean, when they traded Rosarina, I did not think, "Oh my gosh, we're doomed." I was like, "Oh, wow, I'm a left-handed starter. That's what the Cardinals desperately need."
right.
I understood that trade. Even while I liked Rosarina and didn't necessarily feel like he got a great shot, I think Liberatore and I think listen, yesterday was he threw some bad pitches in the ninth in the
Right at the end, right
yeah,
at the
right then.
end.
He pitched well until then. He just made a couple bad. That 0-2 pitch to Bader was bad, and the pitch he gave Vientos was bad. But generally speaking, he was good. He threw a little longer than he usually does. I wonder if that had something to do with it. But more to the point, when they made the Arozarena trade, I was excited, and not because I don't give a crap about this outfielder. I trust the Cardinals. I'm sure that outfielder stinks. It was hey, this is a guy that's got potential. I'm excited about this guy on this team. But the Cardinals need young left-handed pitching, and this is a good way to get it. And Liberatore has not quite worked out. And Rosarina has worked out to be a good to very good, if not as great of a player as I think he's made sometimes. But otherwise, I find it hard to look at any of those outfielders that the Cardinals have traded and said, "Oh wow, did they really screw that up?" Did they really like O'Neill? Like O'Neill's the best example, right? Like you look at O'Neill and the idea that O'Neill was not going to be in the Cardinals outfield this year. We can now. It's easy for someone from Boston that didn't know the Cardinals situation or the O'Neill situation or the injury situation or the Marmol situation, all the stuff went with O'Neill, or just how frankly sick Cardinals fans were of waiting on him. And at a certain level, when they made that O'Neill trade, what did we say on this show? You know what? Good luck to you, Tyler. If it goes great out there, I don't think anyone's gonna be like, "Oh, I can't believe we traded that guy." Like, no, like the Cardinals made that trade. This narrative that the Cardinals have sent all of these great outfielders elsewhere, it's not really backed up by that much stuff anymore. Like Lane Thomas is fine. like none of these guys are like terrific. I feel like this got stuck when like Luke Voigt got awesome for the Yankees, right? And they're like, oh, they'll go the Cardinals trading somebody else. And like Piscotty didn't turn out to be that great of an outfielder. Bader has been fine. Also, is it me or is Bader a little slower than he was with the Cardinals? I was really surprised they
No,
got
no,
him
no.
out on that double play yesterday.
Yeah,
So
I am too. I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right.
so more to the point, like I just like that notion, the Cardinals still have to figure out their outfield. And we always have talked about how frustrating it is they can never get that set outfield stuff set. But the notion that the Cardinals have just traded away these terrific outfielders, they don't know how good they've got it. I don't think that's actually true. I think a Rosarina is the best case for that. I don't know if anybody else actually stands up to that.
Yeah, I mean, we listen. It's one of these classic examples of like when we try to analyze what went wrong or what's gone wrong or whatever, and John Smith will have a theory and Joe Blow will have a theory, and the theories seemingly conflict, and they don't, but they don't because it's the old saying, sometimes both things are true. You know, um, we can look at the Cardinals' big picture in their outfield, the way they've gone through so many outfielders, and they're still trying to find one that is going to be really, really good. And it's like a never-ending frustration. And it's totally cool to point that out. It's totally cool to point that out. They still can't get the outfield right. However, to just like simply conclude that they have somehow failed these outfielders, like they didn't know what they were doing with these outfielders. I just don't think it's as easy as that. I think there's a lot that's gone into it because we saw Dylan Carlson at his best. We saw Tyler O'Neill at his best. Um, we saw Newt Bar in, 21 later in the year and then 22. I mean, he looked terrific and he needs to sort of get back to where he was. So, the Garcia thing rankles me too, because technically, yeah, the Cardinals got rid of him. They didn't give him a chance, but The part that people leave out, of course, the Texas Rangers did the same thing. They designate him for assignment, and then they got like 3 guys hurt, and they're like, "Well, we better bring him back." They weren't going to. So it's I just don't like. I think sometimes you do take the easiest answer and the most simple answer, and it really does apply. But I think a lot of those cases, all my years of analyzing baseball, especially, I find it to be a lot more complicated than what the most simplistic answer would give us. And it's at some point, Tyler O'Neill had to play, and he had to play in a way where he was bringing his talent out, and that's up to Tyler O'Neill first. And I got to tell you, I'm really already sick and tired of hearing all these people just going nuts on O'Neill. See. Listen, unless you said at the time of the trade, unless you said it on Twitter or X or Threads or Facebook or wherever, unless you said at the time they made this trade, oh, they're really going to regret this. I wouldn't have traded. Unless you said that, you got no credibility. So shut up about it.
And for the record, like again, I think Tyler O'Neill. I'll just go in this branch here. If Tyler O'Neill hits 35 or 40 home runs this year, I honestly still think it was a good idea. The Cardinals just had traded because I don't think he would have done that here. I
don't think so either.
Time for a move. It was time for a move, and for everyone's sake. And I think it was a good call. Here's what, if I may dial back for a moment.
Sure.
And this brings us back to the same conversation we had when we talked about opening day of booing Mo is, I would argue booing Mo is a totally acceptable activity. Boo your heart. Again, I say it all the time. I'm not a booer, but feel free to boo all the way. But what we pointed out was it was weird to boo Mo and not boo DeWitt. And I wouldn't boo DeWitt either. But you want to know what the actual original sin that the Cardinals outfield is? It isn't guys the Cardinals traded away. It was getting outbid for Louis Robert. That was the mistake. When they got outbid for Louis Robert, we all saw that when that was happening. The Cardinals, it was all set. This is the guy. This is super guy. The Cardinals, when the White Sox outbid him, and sure, he's had some injury woes, but like Robert is a talent. We talk about O'Neill. If he's healthy, he's a great talent. Robert's a better talent than that when he's healthy. And why did the Cardinals not get Robert? It wasn't because Mo said, I don't want him. It's because the Cardinals wouldn't pay. Cardinals wouldn't pay them. And I understand. Bernie, I agree with you. The idea when people complain about the payroll, that's not, it's about spending the payroll wisely. And I agree. I'm not saying just hit this number, DeWitt. What's your problem? Why won't you hit? That's not what I'm saying. But they cheaped out on that. They cheaped out on Robert when it was happening. You're like, wait, why aren't we getting this guy? All it is money, and it's not even that much. Because you were just posting him. And that, to me, that I would argue that mistake was bigger than even the Rosarina trade. But because we don't think of mistakes that way, we think of mistakes as a general manager's mistakes or an executive mistakes. We don't actually think of mistakes. That's where you spend the money. That's cheap money right there. What's not cheap money is Miles Michaelis, who is fine, by the way. I will always praise Miles Michaelis when he does well. He had a bad start at the beginning of the week, had a good start at the end of the week. But like that's pouring bad money after bad money. Buying cheap on a young player that they could have had Robert, that was an opportunity that they passed up because they got cheap at the wrong time. No one remembers that because they never had him to trade, but they could have had him and chose not to. And to me, that's a bigger issue. But we don't think of the way in transactions that way, and we probably should.
Well, and I'm glad you said that. And Bill DeWitt Jr. I talked to him about the Robert thing, and he. I appreciated his honesty, maybe not his judgment, but I appreciated the fact that he was candid with me because he said that, you look at the hit or miss rates for, prospects and especially guys that, you maybe not have had much of a chance to scout, not as much as players that are in the U.S. or whatever. And we just felt that was just too much money, too much of a gamble on a young player that clearly has got talent, but we weren't sure about a couple other things. And again, I'm not defending him. I'm saying I'm confirming, that was the case. They didn't want to spend the money. So what you said is absolutely true. On the other hand, I also know that the White Sox got an in with him and his agent, and Jose Abreu had a lot to do with Robert wanting to go to Chicago. But Chicago also gave them most money, and it wasn't even close. So I think your point stands. I really do.
And I guess to me, this is the larger thing is clearly, and I think the Cardinals have made a lot of mistakes in their player development, and there are still issues with that. I don't look at Walker and say, "Oh, the Cardinals can't develop talent. It's way too early." Remind you, he's younger than Mason Winn, like only by 2 months, but
Well,
he's still younger than Mason Winn. It's still too early to be saying that. Pitching to me is where the issue is,
yeah.
not necessarily with the lineup.
Well, and I remember last summer, I remember over the winter, our good friend Derek Gould, who much admiration for him on
Or of
all
course,
counts, right? Week after week in his chat at STL Today, he's fighting off people that are basically declaring Mason Winn a bust. Oh, he's overhyped. Well, he hit 172. Some guy was even telling him, "Oh, I saw him in the minors. He's not that good defensively." It's like, can you let a guy like actually play in the big leagues for more than 5 minutes before you basically say he's garbage? I mean, what we do that all the time, and I don't understand it, and it's just so stupid. And it's funny when a player comes up early and has some success, we're all excited. Oh man, what a great talent. And then as soon as something goes wrong, it's not about the player or it's not about the agent whispering in his ear. It's not about his father uh, sort of contradicting what coaches are saying. No, no, no. It's the Cardinals are screwing this up. And then look, listen, and I know that the bottom line, they own the bottom line. And that's what my point about outfield and how they can't get that right. That's absolutely the case. But if you go case by case basis, it's not as easy as it seems. And the other thing too, I have another criticism. If we want to talk about money, again, it's not because they won't spend 300 million on Yamamoto or whatever, because they never were going to do that. But they're very conservative in the international market. They look for. I'm all about finding value purchases. They don't play that game at the top of the list. They don't play it in the in the like the no limits poker room or whatever. They're always at a more conservative spot in the casino. And what do they really have to show for it? Like we do see players that have been signed internationally that have done really, really well. And yeah, there is a swing or miss aspect to it. Some of these guys don't pan out, and there have been some really bad contracts given to them. But the Cardinals aren't even willing to really sit at the table. Another really good example. Um, they had a good chance to sign the young Gurriel, Lourdes Gurriel.
Mhm.
They were right there with Toronto. And I remember, I remember thinking they were confident they're going to get him, and I thought they were going to get him. And I called John Mozeliak afterwards, and he said, and it was at the time it's an off the record conversation, but years have gone by and it doesn't really matter anymore. And he said, "No, we finished second," and he was frustrated. Now I don't know where he thought that he was misled by the agent. I have no idea. But the bottom line is, they really wanted Gurriel, and they really went after him, but they finished second. Well, if you really want him that much, why would you finish second? Go sign him, That's like another example of what we're talking about. So I think the stuff that people complain about, I think a lot of it is they're complaining about the wrong thing. The international market is another example of that. Why aren't they more of a serious, aggressive player in the international market? I know they sign a lot of players, but they're just kind of hoping to get lucky with a few of them, rather than saying, well, this guy's an elite talent. Let's go get him. They don't do that.
And listen, two things off of that. One is in the smaller version, I would say that I think their resistance to what's the phrase, penny wise pound foolish. I think that like they are so comfortable with their comfort zone and so uncomfortable with anything
Mhm.
outside of it. Then you get to the point where you've like. I just like it's amazing we're talking about 1 million here or 2 million a year for these young players when they just handed 19 million for the next 2 years to Michaelis. And again,
No, that's
Michaelis,
right.
I say that as like Michaelis had a good start the other day, and I am tougher on Michaelis. I would say there's probably no player on the Cardinals I'm tougher on than Michaelis because, like, to be honest, I personally find his personality very grating, and so when it's not backed up performance, I will grant my own personal bias on that, but I will also say that whatever your thoughts about Michaelis, even at his best, he's like really a $19 million pitcher for 2 years in the future when he's into his late 30s, but they know him and he's here. And I feel like that is where their bias is. They are much more comfortable spending way more money than Louis Robert would have cost back at that time for a guy that, like, he's here. He wants to pitch opening day. He's comfortable doing that as opposed to,
Yep.
something that's a little bit risky, a little bit out of the comfort
I
zone.
agree. No, I agree. That's a really well said. Every way you said that. I agree. I concur, my friend.
And the larger thing I would say, and I know sometimes I think I'll occasionally get emails every once in a while being like, that saying that we kind of go, occasionally we'll go after straw men. So on the idea, well, people say this and that's not fair. And so on. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but I've heard it from a couple of people. I would say, a, when you hear stuff, you can't help but respond to it, particularly when it can get very loud.
Right.
But B, in defense, however, I would say that, like, and I've touched on this before, I do think that when the Cardinals are in the situation that they are currently in that they are coming off a last place season, are, for all the positive things I think we've seen this year, are still in fact in last place,
Right.
and not out of last place yet. And I think this week could get them out of last place, and frankly could get them back to 500 or higher. I'm optimistic that, again, as I said in the piece, this is a different Cardinals last place team than last year's last place team.
I
But
think
boy, but what
I
a statement to make, man!
Yeah.
That this Cardinals last place team is better than the Cardinals last place
Yeah,
team.
it's not exactly the standards you want to
Which
have,
is
right?
exactly which why I will, I've said this before, I will grant a little wider berth for the occasional bouts of fan irrationality than I might have in the past, because people are dissatisfied. You don't need to look far to see all the empty seats at Busch Stadium in midweek to see how dissatisfied that people are. And listen, I think I watch all of these games. I'm making 2 trips to Busch Stadium this year, and I cannot wait. I am not that sort of dissatisfied fan that's not going to the ballpark. If I lived in St. Louis, if I lived in downtown St. Louis, it would be really hard for me not to go to every game. Like, this is my happy place. They've got me. But I understand at a certain level, fans, like, it's been bad. This is as bad as the Cardinals have been in most people's lifetimes that are paying for these tickets right now. And so, yes, sometimes they'll react too strongly to, well, Walker got sit down. They clearly have no idea what they're doing. And I agree. Some of that's irrational. A lot of that's irrational. A lot of that's wrong. I do think, however, when your team is, your organization is where it is, and your team is in last place after being in last place the year before, you've lost a lot of the benefit of the doubt. And I think that's generally what people are responding.
No, I agree. And when it comes to something like the Walker, I want to point this out too. It's okay to raise questions. It's okay to raise that question. It's okay to say, well, how come this keeps happening with outfielders? It's a totally legitimate question. It's like, what does this tell us about the Cardinals? Question. Okay, that's a legitimate question. Where I am, and my pragmatic brain won't let me make that leap. I think the questions are valid to ask, but I won't jump to conclusions because I think it's more complex than the most simple answer. That's all. But yeah, no, listen, people can fuss all they want. In fact, um, some of the stuff just drives me nuts, and I admit it. But then again, they're entitled to say what they want. They can criticize what they want. The only thing I say to people is, like, when things are going well with the team, try to enjoy it. If you thought, like, for example, Kyle Gibson was just a horrendous signing, a waste of money. He's just a below average, mediocre guy that, he's just really nothing. He's just kind of a rotation filler, and he was cheap. Kyle Gibson's actually been really good for them this year. He's had one bad start, and the other starts like a 2.88 ERA, and he went toe-to-toe with Freddie Peralta and Jordan Montgomery. I mean, Kyle Gibson is doing what they're paying him for, because what do you expect from a fifth starter? Yet I'm, like, arguing all the time about this, because he's not like Steve Carlton or something, that means the Cardinals are cheap. No, he's a fifth starter, and as fifth starters go, especially him giving you 6 innings plus every single time out, as fifth starters go, he's really good. So I don't know. It's like, that's the stuff that drives me nuts. Try to be fair with your criticism, at least try. But that's the thing that bothers me. It isn't the criticism, it's the misplaced criticism. And then it's a will, and then it's if you've been on Twitter or X and you've been blasting Kyle Gibson since the day they signed him, it's okay to say, maybe I was too hard on this guy. Maybe he's better than I thought. You're not gonna what you're worried about losing face on Twitter. I mean, just try to be honest about things. That's and I'm with you all the way with your criticism, but just try to be honest. Don't be a poser, and don't pretend you didn't say or write something 20 times on Twitter when you already have. So anyway, I had to get that rant off my chest.
I understand. I would just my general rule
Yeah.
about sports is I just try to even if listen, there's a lot of things the Cardinals have done that I thought were very bad ideas and they turned out great. And what I did? I dropped it because I want the Cardinals to win and be happy with my team.
That's right.
wins. And so there was a time put this into my current Knicks fandom. And by the way, go Knicks! Woo! I was fully on board with, okay, this Tom Thibodeau stuff is not working. It's not working. It's time to make a change. This guy's stuck in the old days. We need a guy that understands everything's threes and fast paced and wild. And what is this hard work defense crap? And I was totally wrong. And I love this team so much. And I'm willing to it's okay to be wrong. I am wrong all the time. It's wonderful. It's freeing so I would for me, it's just sports are fun. Sports are fun. Let's remember it's fun. But
Yeah.
I would just say this. It's a lot easier for sports to be fun when your team is not in last place for 2 consecutive years. You tend to grouse more when you've gotten used to, I would argue with good reason, a team that's not in last place being in last place 2 years. So that's what I would generally say about that.
Right.
Okay.
And fans have a lot of legitimate beefs. That's my point. I know I seem like I'm a fan basher. I'm not a fan basher. I'm a basher of people who are just spewing nonsense to spew nonsense. But people that my favorite things have always been when someone writes to me or talks to me and they tell me why I think I'm wrong and they make a case and they back it up. And I'm inspired by that. I actually really love and respect people who are critical, but they're doing it in a way that where I learn something, or it even forces me to re-examine my own opinion. I love that. But just hot noise because you're trying to impress the other cowboys on X? No, I have no use for that.
Listen, I don't understand. You think you got like a nickel every time someone engaged with you. I would understand the mindset, but you don't. I just feel obliged. I haven't gotten my check anyway.
I had a guy Saturday, and this was actually kind of funny. Real quick, the Cardinals open up a 6-0 lead on the Mets. They're in the process of winning the series, but it gets a little tight at 6-4. And this was after the game where I'm talking about, well, they've won 3 out of 4. They've, 4 out of 5. They've done this and they've won another series and blah, blah, blah. And the guy who's a Cardinals fan and moved to New York like in the mid-90s or something, he says, nah, this was just another of drunk day ball in New York. I've seen this from the Cardinals every time they, I'm used to seeing this every time they come to New York. You can always count on a drunk day ball game. And play say the Cardinals were out drinking like crazy the night before or something. And it's like, wait a minute. They got off to a 6-0 lead. They won the game. Yeah. But why are you so unhappy?
Also, nobody drinks in Midtown. They're staying at 4 Seasons in Midtown. The Foley's is closed. That's not happening.
My experience, and I really mean this. Side note on the Cardinals, the younger generation doesn't go out and they don't drink.
They're no fun.
It's not like it was back in the day.
Yeah. Where who goes out? The umpires.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, Rick on the road. Rick Hummel and I run in umpires all the time, right?
Oh yeah.
We would run into older players all the time, but we run into younger players never. So
the game's hard enough without shaking off a hangover the next morning. I agree. I think it's kind of a bummer. I think I loved the idea of Keith Hernandez with a cigarette and a beer in the dugout. But that's not who they are anymore.
Now Jim Edmonds in New York, maybe a different story, but I digress.
Yeah, but Edmonds is a different cat across the board.
Right.
This is why I've also made the argument, let Edmonds do this long enough, we'll actually love him like Shannon. This is my theory about Edmonds.
That's right.
Get it long enough. Shannon maybe had fewer tabloid scandals in his day, but nevertheless, still a good time. Okay, so This week, 3 in Detroit, including getting to see our old friend Jack Flaherty.
By the way, the Tigers are pretty good,
Yeah, Tigers are not bad.
and they pitch very well.
They
and
don't
that,
have the Cardinals missed Skubal, which is good because that guy is dominant.
and the Cardinals don't have an offense yet, not consistently. So they.
But I have to tell you, if you told me the Cardinals knocked around Jack Flaherty on Tuesday, I don't know if I would necessarily be that upset if I heard that. I'd say that nothing personal against Jack Flaherty, but it would be really annoying if he shut out the Cardinals.
It would be.
I would
But
say.
unfortunately, that doesn't take all that much to
No,
do.
it doesn't.
So,
Don't be that
so
good. And then they've got
although I thought Quintana was really outstanding.
he's a good pitcher, man.
Yeah.
He's been a good pitcher for a while. Like he's just kind of hanging on. And then they've got 3 against the White Sox, who are the worst team in baseball, but did just sweep the Rays behind newest White Sox star outfielder Tommy Pham.
Of course.
Welcome back, Tommy Pham. All right, Cardinal fans. Please give Tommy Pham a big ovation when he comes to the plate this week.
Love Tommy
I
Pham.
implore you. I love me some Tommy Pham.
Me too.
I would love to see the Cardinals go 4-2 this week. I'd love to see us back at 500 next week. Programming note, by the way, I'm going to be in Los Angeles next week, so we're going to be taping Tuesday rather than Monday. So we'll be a day later next week because I will be in Los Angeles. I'm flying out there on Monday. I'll be at Dodger Stadium on Wednesday, and I got a book. My editor lives out in L.A. now, Bernie. So I got a book. My book is due in 3 weeks. So it's the nitty gritty time. So we're meeting out there. So Bernie, have a great week. We'll talk next week, next Tuesday. Until then, seeingredpod@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter, all that sort of stuff. Have a good one, Bernie.
All right, bud.